Pakistan's military has lost their life in the fight against terror, and we should acknowledge that. And so I don't think you have a government in Pakistan that condones the idea of terrorism. Let us put that on the table, but not have it as a definition of the Pakistani people. So what is being done at the highest level of the State Department to engage, confront, and demand, if you will, an action that is responsible, that wants to ease the humanitarian crisis in Jammu and Kashmir, and to have a free flow of discussion and a resolution of this matter at the highest level?
I mean, U.S. leaders have had high-level engagement ever since August 5th on the subject of Kashmir. You've heard President Trump speak publicly to his own desire to help mediate if the parties were to agree. And this has been a subject of conversation between the Secretary, between the President, and we continue to urge that there be a reduction in tensions between India and Pakistan. But we can't, while I share your praise for Pakistan's courage in losing over 70,000 lives, military and civilian, in the fight against those groups that were targeting the Pakistani state, we're looking for the same level of commitment in fighting militants who are targeting the Indian state, or the Afghan state. And so that dialogue, very important dialogue with Pakistan, also continues. And I think the combination of irreversible and sustainable actions by Pakistan and actions by India to return political life.
Right, my time is ended. So let me just say this. I will engage you as chair of the Pakistan caucus, but it must be a fair and balanced assessment of both countries. But right now, there's a humanitarian crisis. I'd like this government to be able to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. I yield back.
Clearly, you've acknowledged that this is a humanitarian crisis, and you've acknowledged that there have been talks at high levels that between the President. I remember the Oval Office meeting with the Prime Minister of Pakistan about him talking about engaging in some sort of a mediation. However, it's not clear that you have a plan that is focused together. I mean, there's been a ban by the Indian government in terms of access to Kashmir by one of our own colleagues and by the press. It's not clear to me, notwithstanding all the engagement you've talked about, it's 2 months now since India's unilateral action, as to what this plan is that you're pursuing and that you're bringing together.
By plan, I think with regard to India, the continued engagement with the government of India to see the lifting of the restrictions and a roadmap that the international community can understand about the return to political and economic normalcy in Kashmir. Prime Minister Modi, shortly after he revoked Article 370, made a commitment to the people that has been reaffirmed publicly by members of his cabinet that Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir would return to being a state, would return to having assembly elections. How do you get there? And so that's a very important conversation to have. With respect to the tensions between India and Pakistan.
He's also talked about one nation and one constitution. Mm-hmm. That seems to be in conflict.
Sir, it's going to depend upon the legislation that's pursued and adopted. Right now, we see, and we've talked about the national citizenship.
You do believe human rights are being violated today in Kashmir among the Muslims and the Sikhs, do you not?
I believe that there have been human rights violations, yes. And I believe that as a democracy, India's institutions need to function, and sometimes they function more slowly than we would like.
But these house arrests, this bringing in of additional troops into Kashmir, almost 800,000, I believe, for 8 million people. It's almost one troop for every 8 people. These house arrests. What protests has our government made to the Indian government for those actions?
As I've said, we've spoken to the Indian government, expressed our concerns. You've seen our statements made publicly. But we value very much our partnership with India and India as a like-minded partner.
I think we value, it's the world's largest democracy. I mean, we value that partnership both with India and Pakistan, and they both have nuclear weapons. Why this is such a potential flashpoint, I think. And it's just not clear what this administration is doing about it.
Well, you've seen the president himself engage multiple times with Prime Ministers Khan and Modi. He's spoken publicly about his concern over the tensions that exist between the countries. He's offered to mediate. His officials have engaged with their counterparts. And the key to getting to a dialogue is creating an environment that allows one to take place. And that means ensuring that sustainable and irreversible steps are taken to counter militants operating from Pakistani soil, and that steps are taken by India to restore political.
So what do you think the purpose
normalcy.
of the military buildup is in that region?
The troop numbers that are cited are misleading in the sense that a lot of those troops, many of those troops, are deployed along the line of control. And along the line of control, there are ongoing military skirmishes. Yesterday, 10 people were killed as a result of cross-border fire. And this has been the state of the line of control since the ceasefire of 2003 broke down. We urge both parties to return to respect for the line of control, use of the DGMO hotline, and other confidence-building measures. We welcome the fact, for instance, that in November, a corridor will be opened up between India and Pakistan that will allow Sikh pilgrims to travel to holy sites in Pakistan.
I understand the Gurdwaras have been closed. Is that your understanding among the Sikhs?
I'm sorry?
That their Sikh temples have been closed. Is that accurate, do you think?
The corridor that we're talking about is to allow and facilitate pilgrims, Sikh pilgrims from India to travel freely to Pakistan in order to visit a shrine.
And I've met with a number of constituents, Kashmir Americans, who are concerned about their relatives in the region and trying to contact them. And it's been noted by other members about the lack of access to cell communication and other means. What are you trying to do what advice would you give me to give these Kashmir Americans who are very concerned about their relatives?
We share the concern. Approximately 4 million cell phones have now been turned back on, along with 50,000 landlines. That's about half of the cell phones. It does not allow SMS. There's not internet coverage in the Kashmir Valley. In Jammu and Ladakh, the situation has largely returned to normal, and we're encouraging the Indian government to move quickly so that people can live a normal life and not face these terrible burdens.
My final question is, why do you think India has not allowed the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry on the High Commissioner for Human Rights to investigate any potential human rights violations that have taken place both in Indian-held and Pakistan-held Kashmir?
It's a longstanding position by India to reject the internationalization or multilateralization of Kashmir.
And what cooperation do you have or have you sought from the United Nations to, as they've noted, that this is a challenge that they are trying to focus on?
We believe that India and Pakistan need to engage bilaterally.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Subscribe and click the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications from the Indian Express.